There are 3 accounts of Darkrai found within the Pokemon games, and each of them portray it in a bad light, one where it caused the disaster. But is that really true? Because if we look closer, the opposite actually starts to become strikingly clear. In Pokemon Black and White 2, we can find an abandoned manor, where within we're met with the ghost of a little girl that seemingly passed away here a long time ago. The common assumption is that Darkrai was the culprit behind the girl's death, but nowadays, I don't think that's quite the case anymore. From the books in the library and the Ghost Girl's dialogue, we learn 3 important facts. First off, in her eternal sleep, the girl experienced never-ending dreams of darkness. Secondly, the girl's family came into possession of the lunar wing. And finally, the girl passed away in her sleep. Do you see the problem here? If the girl had truly been suffering from Darkrai's nightmares, then the lunar wing would have cured her, but it didn't. So what would the real reason be? What caused this girl to fall into an eternal slumber? Well, that's found in the estate's library. Here there are 6 different books. One tells us facts about Darkrai, while another talks about Cresselia. But the other 4? Those contain information on Drowsy and Hypno, as well as the move Dream Eater and Forewarn, something that this evolution line is strongly associated with. Not only that, these 2 Pokemon are also known to consume the dreams of others, as well as to hypnotize children in order to lure them away. This heavily overlaps with the girl's symptoms, because she specifically told us that her dreams were filled with darkness, not nightmares. Her dreams were empty, almost as if they were eaten. And this is where Darkrai enters the story, because the book in the library that talks about Drowsy states this. There are Pokemon called Drowsy. They put others to sleep and eat their dreams. Eating nightmares can upset their stomach. With that in mind, it seems as though Darkrai instead came to the manor in order to help the girl, not harm her. It tried to replace the void, the dark dreams she had, with nightmares, ones that would hopefully ward off the Dream Eaters. This is also confirmed by something the Ghost Girl tells us. She says that she heard her dad's voice and desperately tried to tell him to forget about the lunar wing, as if she knew it wouldn't help her. In the end though, either because Darkrai arrived too late, or because the parents actually removed Darkrai's nightmare that filled the void in her dreams, the girl passed away, which left Darkrai as the villain of this rather somber story. Moving on to the Sinnoh region, we have another event that once again paints Darkrai in a terrible light. The event starts with a boy, the son of Sailor Eldritch, thrashing around in his bed, muttering incomplete sentences. But one thing was clearly identifiable. The boy was telling us that some Pokemon named Darkrai was watching him. The story of Darkrai wasn't new to the boy's mother, as she tells us that similar occurrences have happened before. The residents of Canalith City also once fell into a deep slumber of which they couldn't be awoken from. The only remedy reported to cure the townspeople's condition was a lunar wing from the legendary Pokemon Cresselia. Cresselia is considered to be the other half of Darkrai, and it's known as the Crescent Moon Pokemon. In order to get its lunar wing, one must travel to Full Moon Island. In this scenario, I do think that Darkrai actually caused Sailor Eldritch's son to be befallen by nightmares. Not on purpose, of course. Darkrai's ability to instill nightmares in others isn't something it can fully control. Its presence in Canalith City must have caused Sailor Eldritch's son to fall into a nightmare while he was asleep. But why would Darkrai even be there? Well, I think it's because of another disturbance it felt within the dream realm. After we heal the nightmare-stricken boy, we are inexplicably drawn to the nearby Harbor Inn. This inn, however, hasn't been in operation for over 50 years now, and on top of that, its internal layout suspiciously contains only one bed. Once we're inside, the player is greeted by a strange man, who tells us that he was expecting us, and that a reservation to this place has been made in our name a long time ago. While this would scare any reasonable person, we're still compelled by this strange force to lie down and close our eyes. Seconds later, we're no longer in the inn, but rather on an island, specifically New Moon Island. But that doesn't make sense. This place was miles away from where we fell asleep, and on top of that, something seemed off. It felt like you were alone, but at the same time, also intruding onto someone's home. This feeling intensifies as we encroach on the island's center, and it's here that we happen upon a shadowy figure, the mythical Pokemon Darkrai. But going back to the inn, why is it operational again, and why would it lead us to Darkrai's island? Well, the answer to that takes us back in time, all the way to the Hisui region, So originally I was going to have a section here that has the big revelation that would show that the Harbor Inn was actually around all the way back then in the Hisui region, but it doesn't really work out as well as I had originally planned, visually wise anyway. Why, you might ask? Well, the maps of Hisui and Sinnoh have some pretty big stylistic changes. Hisui's map, for example, doesn't have a lot of geographical details, and that makes sense given that it's a hand-drawn map and all, but the fact that multiple rivers and mountain ranges are located at a place where they no longer are in modern-day Sinnoh makes the direct comparison of the maps rather difficult. I'm still confident that the Harbor Inn lines up pretty well with the location in Old Hisui, and I'm still going to play the part which I had already recorded a while ago, but I did just want to quickly point that out. Anyway, back to the regularly scheduled programming. Jubilife Village's river lines up with the one that bisects both modern-day Canalith and Jubilife City. And if we take that into account, well, then the place where the Harbor Inn is located would be situated around the same point of where the old hut was found on Prelude Beach. This old hut doesn't have a ton of lore behind it, but there's one thing we do know. Ghost Pokemon seem to quite like the place, as evidenced by the fact that a Drifloon was planning to abduct a child here back in Legends Arceus. And if we consider this, then the creepy old figure that lulled us to bed here was most likely a ghost Pokemon as well. One that would have stolen our life energy once we fell asleep if Darkrai hadn't intervened. But as you know, Darkrai's presence also causes nightmares, which indirectly must have caused Sailor Eldritch's son to suffer from a nightmare it induced while it was investigating this phenomena. And honestly, all of this, the restless sleep, the uneasy feeling of never fully being able to rest, hits a little closer to home than I'd like to admit, which is why I'm happy to introduce to you the sponsor of this video, Manta Sleep. I've never used a sleep mask before, and I won't lie, the first 2 nights felt a little strange. Not being able to see anything will do that to you, but after that, it quietly became a part of my bedtime routine. The mask is fully adjustable, really easy to put on and off, and the really soft eye cups block out all the light, and unsurprisingly, the total darkness makes falling asleep noticeably easier. While I'm personally a big fan of their Pro sleep mask, they also have options that come in silk and even some that provide sound masking. Manta Sleep also offers a standalone white noise machine with 15 gapless sounds that are engineered for sleep optimization. If you're interested, then you can use my discount code AmazedDragon for 10% off of your purchase. It's at this point in time that we should probably delve a little further into Darkrai's powers and why they seem to cause it more harm than good. Let's go back to New Moon Island. After we capture Darkrai here, a voice will call out to it. We don't know who this voice belongs to, but it does tell us that Darkrai's powers are strong and that it's incapable of controlling them properly, which in turn results in the nightmares it causes to those around itself. This excessive power starts to make a lot more sense once you take a closer look at New Moon Island. This place is reachable through 2 methods. Either you fall back asleep in the same inn, or you can take Sailor Eldritch's boat. Both lead you to the same place. This, I believe, is due to these 2 islands being a point that lies in between the realm of both dreams and reality. I discussed the topic of the Dream Realm in depth before, but now with the release of Legends ZA, there is quite a bit more to talk about. But even before the game's release, the concept of dreams was already a pretty big deal in the Pokemon world. I mean, we have the Wishing Stars, the fragments of Eternatus' body, which are said to be able to make your dreams come true. On top of that, dreams were also a huge part of Pokemon's Generation 5 games, where you could even use the built-in Sea-Gear function to enter the world of dreams. While the gameplay mechanics were rough at best, the lore behind it spans throughout the entirety of Unova's history. Deep in the center of the Unova region lies the Entralink, the place where an ancient civilization once stood. These people used to be able to cross into the world of dreams freely, but nowadays this gateway lies in ruin. We can, of course, still do so now, but again, that's only possible due to the Sea-Gear we received from Dr. Fennel. More importantly, however, is the fact that we are able to take the Pokemon out of the Dream Realm and then use them in the Waking one. And if you've played the Mega Dimensions DLC in Legends ZA, then this might remind you of something. It's the exact same thing we do there. We can travel into the distortions above Lumiose City through the use of Hoopa's rings, and after doing so a numerous amount of times, we can learn that these segments of Lumiose City are actually the subconscious dreams of the citizens there. Sure, this place being the Dream Realm isn't ever stated out about right. But since we know that, and also the fact that Hoopa's rings specifically allow for travel between dimensions, we can make a pretty educated deduction that yes, this is the Dream Realm. We also know that, and this is a pretty big spoiler, so please keep that in mind, Darkrai also exists within this realm, and that its powers is what even started this whole dilemma. And do you also know what the place that we find it in is called? The island which we find it on is the Hyperspace New Moon Nightmare, a nightmarish version of New Moon Island. The question here is though, is this the same New Moon Island we have seen before? Personally, I do think so, yeah. Because while yes, you are able to travel to this island physically, the fact that dreams can still take you there is very much a fact. And if we consider that Darkrai also absorbed a huge amount of Ange's mega energy, then we can certainly conclude that Darkrai's island would very much become soaked in more of its powers. And this, I think, is a good place to now talk about why Darkrai even set up shop above Lumiose Tower in the first place. While at first it would seem highly unusual for Darkrai to come to Lumiose City of all places, it starts to make a lot more sense if we consider everything I've told you about before. Darkrai never intentionally harms people. At most, it would use its nightmares to defend itself. But if the interpretations of Darkrai's past actions hold true, then the explanation for why it's in the Kalos region would make a lot of sense. Darkrai, just like many other Pokemon, also sensed the large amounts of mega energy that radiated off of Ange, and it too also saw how the Pokemon living in the city were affected by the whole thing. But not only that, because we also see someone rather important show up in the nightmarish version of New Moon Island, AZ. While at first you might think that AZ only appeared here because of Tawny or Urbane's subconscious thoughts, I don't think that's quite the case here. We have seen a deceased person show up in one of these dream realms before, and the dream originated from his wife who wished to find the ring that her husband once had before he passed away. And since it also wasn't Urbane's or Tawny's dream that we entered on the top of Lumiose Tower, it must mean that the AZ we meet here is instead a subconscious thought of Darkrai's. If Darkrai knows about AZ, then maybe it was also him that asked this mythical Pokemon to aid them in destroying Ange. And in what form did this aid come? Well, Darkrai's positioning above Lumiose Tower was so that it could absorb as much mega energy as possible, and it's what I think allowed us to have enough time to even stop Ange in the first place. Without its intervention, the amount of mega energy spilling off of Ange into Lumiose City would have certainly caused the rogue mega evolution phenomenon to progress far too fast for us to even handle and prepare for. Darkrai's choice to help us in such a way didn't come without, once again, sacrificing itself, as we see in the endgame of the DLC that the amount of power it absorbed was far too much for it to handle, causing it to, in the end, mega evolve. Which brings us to the last section of this video. Why does Darkrai's mega evolution look like that? Its mega evolution seems to take inspiration from a beholder, a fantasy creature often depicted as a floating sphere, dominated by a single massive eye, and as striking as that resemblance is, there's something else about Mega Darkrai's design that feels rather familiar. Take a look at Mega Darkrai's face, or more specifically, at its hair. Doesn't that remind you of something? AZ's own hair looks this way as well. Is it a coincidence? Maybe, but it's hard for me to believe that it is. If Darkrai truly encountered AZ, then it may have seen him not as a king or a legend, but as something far closer to a kindred spirit. Someone who wielded unimaginable power with good intentions, only to be remembered for the harm it caused instead. Both are outcasts, both tried to save the world in their own way, and both were misunderstood as monsters because of it. One final thing. There is technically another Darkrai encounter, and it's found within Legends Arceus. However, that one is more akin to a boss fight with really just minimal lore attached to it, though perhaps it showed up because of Giratina. Maybe you've got a better idea. If so, then consider letting me know in the form of a comment. Either way, thanks for watching.